Hello and welcome to another Tattered Cover virtual event. We've been doing these for about a year and we want to thank you all for your continued support. If you don't know, Tattered Cover is entering its 50th year as a bookstore. We're Colorado's largest independent bookstore. And so it's thanks to readers like you. If you're from Denver or if you're just joining us from elsewhere, thank you for supporting us. We're actually expanding. We have a new kids store and then a new downtown Denver location right next to the Rockies baseball field. So if you're from Denver, please check those out. Before I go any further, I do want to say that there is closed captioning down at the bottom of the screen. It's a black label button labeled CC. So if you need it or want it, please use closed captioning. If you're interested in more virtual events, we are still having some virtual events throughout the next few weeks, entering into July. The next big one, I think, if you're a fan of this book and you're here for Brittany, you might enjoy T.J. Newman, who wrote a book called Falling, and that's going to be on July 14th. So if you're interested, tatteredcover.com/events. But we are here tonight, and I'm so excited to introduce the author of the Brittanys, Brittany Ackerman, who will be in conversation with Leah Dietrich. Brittany Ackerman's debut essay collection, The Perpetual Motion Machine, was the winner of Red Hen Press's Nonfiction Award. She has a creative writing MFA from Florida Atlantic University and has attended the Writing by Writers Methau Valley workshop and the Mont Blanc workshop in France. She has completed a residency with the Wellstone Center and with the Redwoods. The Brittanys is her debut novel. Leah's essays and short fiction have been published by BuzzFeed, Bomb, The Nervous Breakdown, The Offering. She lives in Portland, Oregon, and Los Angeles, California with her husband and daughter. Please, everyone out there in Tattered Cover virtual land, welcome Brittany and Leah.
Hi.
Welcome. So I'm going to hop off and I'll let you two talk because you know each other and I'm just a stranger on the internet.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Adam.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's great to see you. We were just strangers on the internet very recently, and I appreciate you asking me to do this event with you and also for sharing your book with me before it came out. It was a really such a pleasure to get to read it before everyone else.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to start by reading some of this book. And it is funny because our books are both the colors are very similar and they're like book twins. It's kind of
I was like, I have to bring it just because it is uncanny.
Yes. And with the whole twinning thing and I did see a lot of similarities in like the themes of our work. And so that's, why I reached out. But the part that I'm going to read from is a little further on in the book, and it's from chapter 14. I'm just going to read a little bit so everyone can sit back and enjoy.
All right.
Somehow it's arranged for Lee and me to have a sleepover. I've been eating my lunch in the library lately, keeping to myself as much as possible. But one day, my mom comes home from the salon and tells me that she's met Lee's mom and they've made plans for us to get together. I arrive at her house on a warm Saturday afternoon. Lee wants to go swimming, and I haven't packed appropriately. She lets me borrow a bathing suit, a black bikini with pink stars on the boobs. She braids my hair, and we go into the pool. She's good at gymnastics. We do handstands under the water. We race from one side of the pool to the other. I keep winning, and it feels good to win. She's not upset, though. She just likes to play. There's a jungle gym in her backyard for her little brother, Bobby, who's at a friend's house, and we play on it in our wet bathing suits. Our bodies dry as we swing from the monkey bars and climb atop the wooden structure. Her family has a trampoline, and we jump and sit and bounce each other. Popcorn. We look like popcorn when we bounce. She asks if I want to smoke. Her cousin Casey is coming over, and he always brings weed. And I say, sure. Jensen is probably smoking with Kenzie. It's okay because I have other friends, but it's also not okay because no one is like her. Lee makes us tea with 2 drops of honey and a sliver of a lemon. I'm surprised she knows how to use a knife. I don't know how to cut fruits or vegetables or meat or cook or clean. I am my mother's baby. and I don't know how to do anything that she does. Lee lends me a sweatshirt, and we sit at the kitchen table and eat dates from a bowl. They're chewy and fat, and they remind me of being little in New York City and eating raisins at my friend Clarissa's house. I didn't like her very much, but I was there all the time. I was jealous of her because she had a life-size playhouse complete with a kitchen. She was mean and made fun of me, and she loved those damn raisins. I wonder where Lee's parents are, but they work or they're out and they're not coming home. Casey shows up. He's 17 and a junior and drives a green truck. And he's a little wild looking, a little rough, but he has blonde hair and green eyes. He's cute, and Lee says Kenzie tried to hook up with him once and it made her really mad, so I keep my distance. Casey's eyes are red, and I know he's been smoking, and I'm nervous because I don't really know if I want to do it yet. I do, but I don't. I'm not sure how it'll make me feel. And what if Jensen really is waiting and I'm the bad friend and not her after all? So I try to make up reasons why I can't smoke. Maybe I can feign a headache or a stomach ache, but that's embarrassing, and I don't want to get picked up and go home early. It's dinner time, and Lee says she doesn't feel good. She took one of her mom's pills and it's making her tired. And Casey rolls his eyes and says she does this all the time. And one time she had to go to the hospital and get her stomach pumped. And I don't remember anyone telling me that story. And I realize I don't know Lee that well. Casey puts her to bed. She's still in her bathing suit, and I worry about her. But he says she just needs to sleep because the pill makes you tired. It's something you just need to sleep off. He tells me it's for people who worry, and I wonder if I'll ever need something like that because of how much I worry all the time. Years later, when I went on Wellbutrin, Lexapro, Celexa, I found that none of them made me fall asleep, but they did make me quiet, make my mind quiet. The medications also made my ears ring, gave me nightmares, forced me to think about dying. After so many prescriptions, so many bad experiences with the drugs, I felt helpless until I found the right therapist. It turned out I just needed someone to talk to. For me, talking helps more than anything. Casey says we don't have to smoke if I don't want to, and I don't say anything. He takes my hand and we go back to the jungle gym. He wraps his arms around me and picks me up and spins me around and says, "You're just a little thing, aren't you?" I want him, and I'm shy, and I'm melting, and I feel good and anxious, and I want him to keep holding me. Lee is in bed, sleeping off her worries, and her parents won't be home until late, and Casey is holding me. Casey grabs my face and says he needs to take me on a date before he kisses me, and I say, "This is kind of like a date." "No, a real date," he says. I look at him so dreamily. He leans in to kiss me, but then we hear a noise coming from the house, so we run back, and Lee's parents are home early. I wake up Lee, and she's as good as new and bounces downstairs and hugs her parents. Her mom is so blonde and beautiful with fake boobs and expensive jewelry and tight jeans, and her dad is so handsome and wears a suit. They tell Casey he has to go, and Lee and I walk him out. He asks Lee if we could have a moment alone. When she skipped off back to the house, Casey asks for my number, and I say it, and he repeats it back, and I smile. He says, "I'm going to kiss you on our date," and he drives off in his green truck. I walk back to the house and feel like the world has finally shifted, like anything is possible again. Later, Lee says she knows that Casey wants me. "He'll be good practice," she says.
That's great. Thank you. I wanted to maybe just start at the beginning and, hear you talk for people about where the idea for the novel, The Brittanys, came from.
Sure. So the start of the book was kind of just these weird short stories I was working on when I was in grad school. I was working on a memoir then, my first book, but I kind of needed a little bit of an escape from that from time to time. It was very heavy subject matter. And I started thinking about high school and about, I really did have 5 best friends, all named Brittany. And my best friend and I at the time, we were kind of like the core of the group. And I just started thinking about those girls and that time and tried to put them in fictional, just kind of funny heartbreaking, like weird situations together. And after, a few months, I had, like 5 or 6 short stories. And I was kind of thinking I would just submit them, as one-offs, or just, just to have, they were just kind of like these funny little things. And I eventually got accepted to the writing workshop in France. And I didn't really know what to bring because I got in for fiction. I don't even know why I applied in fiction that I think about it. I'm like a nonfiction writer, but I mean, now I guess I'm a novelist, but I was like, let me just bring these stories. Let me see if they're worth anything. I don't know. And my group leader, Alan Heathcock, he really loved the stories, and so did my workshop, but he really felt like it would do a lot better as a novel. And somebody asked me about that recently. Like, they were like, how did you go from even the idea of short stories to a novel? And I guess just because I was so open with it, I really didn't know what it was. I felt very connected to the narrator because the narrator is kind of like an avatar for me. I'm kind of like Philip Rothing myself in the book. Like, it's me, but it's not me. And so I just knew I wanted to take maybe like a year in the life of that character. I was also really in love with In Zanesville by Joanne Beard. I don't know if you've ever read that book, but it is just,
I haven't.
oh, you would love it. It's so good. And it's Joanne Beard's kind of version of, I did my version of her book in that sense. It's a 14-year-old girl, just like a year in the life, but a different time period, obviously, and a coming of age story. So yeah, it was all of those things kind of in one. And I really wanted to do my, early aughts version of it. But yeah, the beginning of it was just these funky little short stories that were connected, but didn't really have like a through line. And then I'm like, oh, a school year, like that makes sense. We'll just give them from fall to summer and see what happens.
Yeah. For those who haven't read the book yet, like you said, there's 5 Brittany's, and they all refer to each other by their last name. Can you just like tell people a little bit about each Brittany?
Yeah. So the 5 of them, even though I did have 5 best friends named Brittany, and then we had a couple other friends in our group. I think instead of in the book, there's like 7 girls, but I think in real life, it was more like 8 or even 10 of us that were friends all at once. And there was kind of, one that was a little, I hate using this word now, but like a little sluttier and a little more fast with boys. And always, if we were like, oh, we just heard this term, like she always knew what it was. So there was like always that girl in the group. There was one girl that was so hilarious and just like would say the funniest things and had no shame. And so the first, the faster girl, I guess, was kind of based on, Kenzie, which is not one of the Brittany's, but she's a big character in here. And then Rosenberg is kind of like the hilarious, funny one. I did know a girl that had moved from New York, and I was also from New York originally. And she always had like the best closet and just knew everything about fashion. So that's Brittany Tomasi. And then there was another girl. So Brittany Gottlieb is kind of a amalgamation of like a couple people that I knew. And there was always that girl that like was dating someone that didn't go to your school, and she was like, well, my boyfriend at this charter school, like, and just kind of like was like a know-it-all. And so that's kind of that character. There's also that name. A lot of the names are just kind of random, but Gottlieb is actually the name of an artist in the Boca. My mom is here tonight, and she'll appreciate this. In the Boca Raton Museum of Art, there's a painting on the 2nd floor in the back that has the name. It's the artist's last name is Gottlieb, so that's where I kind of stole that from. I knew I always wanted to use that somewhere. And then, last but not least, Jensen's character is kind of the tomboy of the group, and the one that everyone else like really is like in a rush to grow up and just like become a woman. And Jensen's kind of the character that doesn't really know if she wants to do that yet, and still is like really into sports and hasn't really come into her own yet. And is a kind of loosely based on my best friend growing up, but the same way that the narrator is based on me. These are like cartoon versions of the characters. And then the character that I just read about, Lee, we always had a friend that was just like the shy one, and which was actually like a lot of Lee is kind of based on me. I was always really shy, and like I loved like when people would like play with my hair in class and like braid my hair, and like so Lee actually has a little bit of me in there too, but also Lee is kind of like the epitome of like a latchkey kid. Like her parents are never home. She lives in a little mansion. Like she can do whatever she wants, which that was not my experience. Like my mom was a stay-at-home mom while I was in high school, and like cooked for me and cleaned and was always there. And so that character kind of embodies that as well. So yeah, that's the 7 of them. But yeah, in real life, there was kind of more. And I kind of like picked and pulled from different sorts of people that I knew growing up.
Yeah. I love like in the part that you read, you know, especially at the beginning, and they're in their bathing suits, and there's just like so much, like it's just like dripping with desire. And then it's interesting, at least from my read and my perspective. And I think that, you know, my book had some of this as well, about like those high school, like, you know, confusions around like what kind of desire did you have for your friends? Was it platonic or was it more, you know? And it's funny, I would sort of like, I feel like whenever the narrator's talking about her friends, there's like almost this like lust to it. And then like, but then there's this like talking about and pursuing boys and pursuing like drugs in a similar way. There's like just desire like everywhere. And I think that is so specific to like the high school experience, regardless of the time that you're in. And I was just curious, like if there were other, as you were writing this, were there like books about high school or books about like young female friendships? I know you were mentioning Joanne Beard too, like beyond that one, books that you kind of, were there like books you kept on your desk sort of thinking about while you were working on it?
I have a few books in mind, but the major, well, you were just saying all that's about like desire and lust. And I mean, the movie 13 came out when I was growing up. And I mean, like if anyone here has not seen that movie, like you need to go find it and see it tonight. It's incredible. But I remember seeing that movie and feeling very like far away from it, and just like, wow, I could never actually go. And that was a film that's based in California, like kind of like West Hollywood and the Valley, and you know, all of those like amazingly cinematic places. And I grew up in South Florida, which is cinematic in its own way. But the desire in that movie was kind of like what I always felt internally in my mind. But in the movie, they, you know, act out these things, and they really explore their sexuality with each other, with boys, with the lifeguard, with anybody. And you know, I always felt kind of like my desire was kind of like pent up, and I felt like unable to express it. Which, I mean, in the book, I feel like I'm able to elaborate on it more, which was kind of cathartic. Another piece that stands out to me, I return to this piece often, is in Sarah Gerard's book, Sunshine State, her first piece, BFF, where she talks about that friendship. I mean, that was definitely a big inspiration for the role between, you know, the narrator and Jensen's character, like this kind of love-hate relationship with a best friend. And that idea that you know, when each other's periods are coming, like, you know, that you know the other person like inside out, and like their lies that they tell, the lies that you've told that they know is a lie. And that's just really beautiful painting of that. I'm trying to think what else. I mean, like, even like I'm thinking of stuff I've read recently too, and like stuff that I was returning to while I was writing. Like, I loved the voice that Chelsea Hodson writes her book in. And that's memoir. And I know this is fiction, but and so is Sarah Gerard's book too. It's nonfiction, but with that voice, I just wanted to really master, like, there's a story in that, or I say story, there's an essay in that book. What is genre? There's an essay in that book called I'm Only 1,000 Miles Away. And it's about these teenage girls that like call into a hotline to like win a contest about a song that's playing on the radio, and like obsession and lust and all of the things that you just were talking about. And I really wanted to like aim for that. Like, I was aiming of whatever my version of that felt like. And we did have this like big clique of friends. And yeah, at times, like, I would find myself attracted to parts of them, whether it was, I wish I had their pool, or like, I wish I had their parents, or, you know, because like my parents were always there, and I was like, what would it be like to be the latchkey kid? Like, what would it be like to have more freedom? when then, they would come over and be like, oh, I love that your mom always cooks for us and is always
Right.
there.
Right.
So just like that push and pull, and just trying to like express that in the work.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you keep a journal when you were like in that teenage year that you're talking about in this book?
I did, but it wasn't very helpful in this, because my writing was so, I mean, I feel like everyone probably feels this way, but it was just so bad. Like, it was just me being like depressed again, like I hate Samantha, or whatever it was. Like,
Right.
it wasn't really explorative, it was more like declarative.
Yeah.
And it was just a way, it was very like Harriet the Spy, like it was very just like me observing, and just like Rebecca Solnit has a really great quote about in her book, I'm forgetting the name of it now, it'll come to me, but she has this quote about like going to the Grand Canyon, and how when you're a little kid, like you're like playing with like sticks in the sand, and you're like playing with little race cars, and you don't really care about the view, but then when you go as an adult, you're like, oh my god, the view, like and I feel like that's how my writing has really evolved. Like when I was younger, I was just so mad at everything, and I was just like, life sucks, but like just kind of trying to be edgy. But as I got older and took writing classes and read more, I mean, 100% reading more, I feel like I'm able to see the bigger picture of things. So I feel like my journaling has changed in that sense too. Like I have a newsletter now, which is kind of like a journal for me. And I try to get really specific with like events that happen in my life, and how I felt about them, and how I felt physically, emotionally. Um, yeah. So I think the journal that I kept was just very emotional. And
Yeah.
but I always did write down my feelings, at least, and
Mm-hmm.
got them out that way.
And so did you consult that to kind of like take yourself back to what it was like to be 14, 15, or did
Yeah,
you feel like you had internalized that enough?
kind of both. Like I definitely looked at it. Like I definitely, because a lot of it was actually luckily on a computer, because when I was in
Mm.
high school, my school that we went to required us to have laptops at one point. It was weird prep school stuff. And I had like this like really crappy like Dell computer that like barely worked. You literally had to bang on it to get it to work, which probably was not good. And so I had some of the files transferred over for years and years and different computers. And so I did go back and look at some of those, and because there were some that were like, I'm in the library today, and like I'm thinking about this person, and are they, and so that helped me remember, like, because I would timestamp them as well, and that was helpful.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, a lot of it is internalized. Like I could put myself mentally back into situations that I was in, and the freedom of fiction. I know that you're working on fiction now, and you have experienced that freedom of, I don't have to get it all right. Like it's more about the feeling of it than actually trying to remember every single little thing. So yeah, a little bit of both. I looked at it to kind of be like, wow, that was painful, and then
Yeah,
got to kind of revise it and re-envision it in the book.
totally. What was I going to say? Your dialogue is also really great, I feel like. And I was curious, this is such a minute question, but like when you're writing, do you say things out loud as you're like writing your dialogue? And does that mean that you have to write? Like I know certain friends who are like, I talk out loud a lot while I write, which means I can't write in public at all. So what is that? Is that you?
Totally. I will read things back to myself, because I think you have to hear it. I mean, I tell my students this, I'm like, read your papers out loud. And that's like an analytical paper. Because I'm like, you'll catch yourself. But I think with creative writing too, to hear the dialogue, to be like, that doesn't sound right. Or like if something reads as funny. I mean, even when I give a reading, I mean, the Zoom readings are different, but like I had a launch party this weekend, and I read a part of the book that I know it's funny, but certain people reacted to certain words that I said in like a more, they laughed, and I was like, wow, I would never have thought that part of it was funny. Like I'm working on a thing now, and I'm reading it out loud, and like I also love like sending bits of dialogue or bits and pieces of stuff to friends, and just like seeing their reaction, and
Yeah.
like not just anyone, but like my writer friends, or like
Yeah.
and just being like, look at how ridiculous this thing is I just wrote. And then they'll be like, no, I love it, it's perfect. Or like, oh wow, that is crazy. And but yeah, I totally will I mean, I talk to myself all the time anyway, so I'm kind of used to it. I have like no shame or fear or embarrassment of that. But that happens a lot too. Like if I'm driving and I think of a scene, I'll record it on my phone and then get back and listen to it later. So I'm a huge fan of the out loud. I mean, my husband, there's like no secrets. So like he'll be here and be like, what is that? I'm like, oh, it's the novel. And he's like, oh, okay. Because yeah, but like today I was writing a scene about I'm writing this thing about like a sorority girl in the Midwest and like sleeping with a fraternity boy for the first time, and he's just like, what is going on in there? So, you know, all in good fun.
That's funny. Yeah. You were talking about sending bits of dialogue to writer friends, and I think that's one thing, you know, I'm sure there's people listening who are writers as well, and like having a community of writers is so important. And I know for me, it was hard to find. I didn't go to grad school, and I know that you did, but like, how have you found your writer friends and sort of like your people? Because I think that is one of the most important things to like keeping you, you know, going, or like keeping you inspired, especially if you're not under contract for a book or something.
Yeah, it's such a good question. I feel like especially like aspiring writers would be wondering that too. It's like, where do you find your people? And some of it is like totally random. Like one of my really good friends that I share a lot of work with, like we met at, and Erica, if you're here, hello. We met at a reading at Skylight Books in LA, and like we just sat next to each other, and I was like, hi. And then she's like, hello. And then like we just, I don't know, it was like an energy kind of thing. And I'm like, well, this person's at a reading that I wanted to go to. So like, obviously we must have some common interest, you know, and then just started going for coffee and, you know, now like 3 years later, like having a book party at her house, and like, so grateful for that. And I do still have some friends from grad school. Like I had like a weird grad school experience because the learning and the education that I got and the feedback on my manuscript, I mean, obviously like that work went on to get published, so that was amazing, but I also had like a terrible relationship during grad school, and just like some hard family things going on. But I have like one really good friend, her name is Rebecca, from grad school that I talk to like every day, and we send each other things constantly. I kind of felt like, okay, as long as I come out of here with like one reader, I feel like, you know, and I have other friends from there that I'll send things to sometimes, but she's like a diehard. Like I can send her something and be like, I don't know what this is, just let me know, you know, and she'll look at it and be like, I don't know what it is either. Or she'll be like, actually, I really like this. And, but I think, yeah, it's just like finding people that have a common, like, it's like how you find a partner. It's like you're trying to find people that have a similar worldview to you, like a similar literary taste. I'm also in a book club in Los Angeles. And so there's been people I've, you know, and I've been in there for like over a year now, but I'm just starting to be like, hey, do you want to share work sometimes? Or,
right.
You know, and also like writing workshops. Like I try to go to one writing workshop a year because they're expensive. And if you work full time, it's very hard. But I'm going to see Wani this summer, and I actually got a fellowship for that. So that's
amazing.
Nice.
Congrats.
Yeah. And it's like, I'm looking forward to, you know, there's going to be like, what, like 50 people there or something. And I'm sure maybe after I'll exchange emails with like a few of those people, you know, just being open-minded. I think also not being shy. Like you really have to, it's like how I met with you, you know, I was like, hey, would you wanna, you know, and then we start talking, and like writers are lonely, and writers are shy, and writers are weird. And I think just knowing that and being like, the worst that someone can say is I don't have time, or I'm not interested. And yeah, that might be painful, but like, you know, I don't know, I'm all about putting yourself out there, and you know, just having the love to give and having the ability to share the work with other people. So yeah, a lot of it's been kind of random, and then others is just like living in LA and like looking for stuff. That same friend Erica, like she was in a writing workshop, and I kind of squeezed my way into that workshop now, and I've been in there for like a year or two, and you know, that's been really helpful. And I think it doesn't have to be like 20 people, you know, it can be like our writing workshop is 6 people, and we're lucky, like, because usually in a workshop there's like that one person you're like, oh god, this guy's work, like we're gonna hear the story about the bagels or like whatever it is, you know. But our work, like I don't feel that way about anybody. And So yeah, it's about just like looking for that stuff and being open to it.
Yeah. The narration in the Brittanys has like, there's interspersed these sections where the narrator, obviously like later in life, is reflecting back on the time. And I was just curious at what point that came into the book. And maybe also you could talk a little bit about, if it's relevant, like the path to publication. And is that something that came in like later, that someone, suggested to you, or was that a device that you felt like you needed from the very beginning?
Yeah. So when I started doing revisions after I got my contract and knew that it was going to be a book, it was actually like July 4th, like 2 years ago. So I guess 2019. Well, I guess actually I wasn't in contract yet, but like they were interested. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of like a do or die situation. Like mm-hmm. I had like a week where it was July 4th and I had to do like a major revision to show Penguin. And we were at my husband's stepdad's beach house and I like locked myself in a room and I was like, I need to do something. Like I need to like hook them, and yeah. Because the skeleton of the book was already there, like the whole manuscript, but I felt like it was lacking something different than maybe other coming of age books, mm-hmm. Especially like literary fiction. So I don't know, I honestly don't know where it came from, but I kind of just started thinking about what if at the end there's like a letter from the narrator to Jensen as kind of like I wish I could say these things to you, like, this is how I feel. And so I wrote this like long thing and it was in italics and that was it. Like, and then I revised other things and, whatever. But so that my editor, Anna Kaufman, she came back and she was like, I love that. She's like, I love that device that you're doing. And she's like, but I wonder if we might put that throughout. Like maybe mm-hmm. you could have these and she called them flashes. And she's mm-hmm. like, maybe have these like flash forwards for like, not every character in the book, because there's a lot of characters in here, and some of them get a page, some of them get a chapter, some of them are, in the whole thing. So then after that revision, in the late summer, then I added in like, okay, well, let me do one for like Kenzie because she's like a pretty big character, and let me do one for this character, and this guy was mean to her, so let me do one that like ends badly, and it kind of became this like poetic justice thing of getting to see where these characters end up. And then we ended up actually taking out the Jensen one and making it's like 2 lines in the book. Mm-hmm. Just like, right. You your hair, you changed, and it's very short because we kind of agreed, like, let's not, give everything away and like wrap mm-hmm. it up in a bow because no friendship is ever wrapped up. So that was that. And along with like the publishing stuff, I mean, publishing is like still a mystery to me. I feel very lucky the way that it happened for me, but after my first book, which I won a contest for that first book.
Oh, cool. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I won Red Hen. I don't know if they still do it. I'm sure they do, but every year they do a fiction, a nonfiction, and a poetry book contest. And you win some money and you get the book published. And so I won that, didn't have an agent. I was like fresh out of grad school. I was like waitressing and like PAing at the time. If you have ever lived in LA, you know what that means. And yeah, I was actually like at a photo shoot for like shoes when I got the call from Kate Gale, and she was like, hey, is your book still available for publication? Because like, we want it to like win this contest, but like, we're just checking that it's still available. And I was like, oh my God, yes, like take it. So that was the first book. And in contract, I had to show them my second book, which was originally the manuscript was called Boca Bitches, but we changed the title after a while. And they passed on it because they were like, we want you to try to go bigger. Like you should try to get an agent. You should try to get this with a bigger press. Like we can only do so much. And I had a really great experience with Red Hen. Like I have nothing bad to say about them. They were fantastic. And Kate is a lovely person. And her daughter Toby is just like a lovely person as well. And Mark as well. All of them are lovely. But yeah, I kind of had like a mild depression because I was like, oh, well, that's it. Like I'm done writing, like no one's going to publish this weird book about my high school, like my like fictionalized high school experience. Like who wants to read about that? But then I just started submitting to agents, and I did that very blindly. Like I wrote up an email and like a query letter, as they call it, and had like my first 25 pages. And I just started emailing like random agents from poetsandwriters.com, which is kind of their thing. I just like sent out blind emails. But then I also looked at obviously like writers that I felt akin to, or that my book was in conversation with, or had a similar voice and themes, and reached out to those agents and wrote like more specific letters. But the agent that ended up getting back to me and that I ended up going with was Mark Falcon, who first of all, I was like, you're like a middle-aged dude. Like, why do you like my book? Like, why are you interested? You know, like, what's wrong with you?
That's interesting.
Yeah. And, you know, he, at the time he had a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old. So he was like, that's why. And like, this book is speaking to a moment that I've never seen articulated. And I love the nostalgia and I love the voice. And I felt really like championed by him. And yeah, he just started, you know, we revised it together, like one or two, you know, swoops on our own. He was the one that suggested chapters, because I didn't have chapters. I was just like, here's the story.
Yeah.
3 chapters.
Yeah.
So that was very helpful of him. And then he just started sending it out. And I guess like a few places were interested, but you know, Penguin was like the top of the top, and we kind of went in with them and started doing those edits. And that was a long process. And then I eventually signed my contract in February of 2020, like right before the pandemic. So it was pretty crazy timing, but it was a long process. I feel like people sometimes think like, I sent out my book and it got published. It's like, no, like it is such a long process sometimes. And you want the book to find the right home. Like you don't want to just put it anywhere, you know? So yeah, I think I also just had a lot of faith that like it would end up where it was supposed to be. And also, you know, I was willing, like, okay, if no one bites on this one, like I have ideas for other things and I'll just write more and see what happens. And you know, so yeah, that was the process, the long-winded answer of that process.
Yeah. So then what about next? Like what's up next? Are you gonna write more fiction now, or do you consider yourself like a genreless writer, or are you gonna go back to the nonfiction memoir? Well,
so in my writing workshop, I started in the workshop always submitting short stories. And then now every time for the last like year, I've been submitting essays. So I feel like I do have another book of essays in me at some point. I was actually thinking the other day, I'm like, I probably have enough to like put something together at some point. But I also am working on another novel. I'm working on, it's not really a sequel to the Brittanys, because I feel like the Brittanys can kind of stand alone and be its own thing, but there are some threads in it that can kind of read as the same narrator, same, you know, same avatar of me. Like I said, it's like Philip Roth. I'm doing my version of that. But it's the college years, and I was in a Jewish sorority in the Midwest, in Indiana, and
right, where I also went to college.
I know, crazy. So I'm kind of focusing on like the junior year, like the year that I turned 21, and a lot of things happened that year. So I'll keep that brief. But yeah, I'm kind of just keeping open-minded to it, and I have more steam going on the novel. I'm trying to like get a draft done of that, and the essays are kind of just like, there are things that still haunt me or things that I'm still dealing with. And I think my first collection was a lot of childhood stuff, and now I have kind of more like an adult I'm barely figured myself as an adult, but even though I'm in my 30s, I'm just like, what is adulthood?
Yeah, it doesn't.
Yeah, I don't know that ever goes away.
No, I don't think so.
But I have more adult problems now, I guess. So I'm more writing about that. I'm really focused on writing about my parents and their upbringings and their, you know, heritage and like more family history. First one was really about my brother and me and you know, all of that. And I'm more interested in more of like a complete family story. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at now. But I think Adam's gonna hop back on to get some audience questions going.
Definitely. They're a little shy. I do have to say, Erica, I believe your workshop friend is in the chat. She said OMG 13. I believe that was about the movie when you were talking about it. I want to ask both of you because I know Leah, you said you're writing fiction and you both have nonfiction out. When do you view those as two completely separate parts of your brain and your muscle, or are they related? Writing nonfiction and fiction. How do you view that relationship? Both of you can answer.
Leah, do you want to go first? Because I just talked a lot.
Well, I would say that I don't think it's a different muscle. I think it's still, at least for me, like writing's always like the purpose is to try to understand something about myself, about the world, about, another person. And so as I've been writing more fiction, I kind of am just like allowing myself, like just taking off the reins a little bit and like just letting myself be more just imaginative and sort of engaging in like the fantasy of what I could have done in a situation that I didn't do. So it feels just more expansive. Whereas like when I would write memoir, sometimes I'd find myself like checking, like I'd have that feeling of just like wanting to follow something, even if it wasn't true. And then being like, well, I should like dial that back into what, really happened, which is always tricky with like memory anyway. It's so you oftentimes don't have any idea like whether something you remember is, objectively true in any way. So yeah, I think the fiction just feels more freeing to me.
Yeah, I've definitely had a very similar experience with writing this novel versus memoir. But I feel like with because I'm mainly just writing like essays now in terms of like my creative nonfiction stuff. And I feel like when I do essay, it's like it's like a month. Like I'll work on an essay for like a month and I'll have an idea and I'll be like, this would be a cool essay, but I don't really know like what it's really about. I just have like a story that my mom told me once about her skirt getting ripped off on the bus, like as it drove away. And I'm like, wow, that's a cool image. But I'm like, well, what is that about? Okay, well, maybe it's about anger or it's about, resilience or, and then I think in terms of the theme of it and then kind of write everything towards that theme. But with the fiction, I mean, if I'm writing short story, it's kind of the same process. But with the novel, it's kind of like a longer haul because that's like right now I'm doing like the 1,000 words of summer or whatever, and I'm doing it wrong. Like you were supposed to start in the beginning of June and I'm doing my own version of it. But that's like every day I write 1,000 words and I'm writing where I left off the day before with the novel. And I'm just kind of writing it all the way through. And just like you said, Lee, it's like the reins can come down a little bit. Like I'm not worrying. So, and I'm not editing as I go or anything like that. I'm just like getting it out and being like, I don't know if that makes sense, but I'm just going to leave it. Like, and kind of just wanting to see it as a manuscript before I even think about it more. But, with the essay, it goes through lots of revisions and like, okay, this is like stage one. And like, and now I'm going to send it to my people or like, now I'm going to bring it to workshop or now I have to revise it. But with the novel, it's like, I mean, I've been working on this. I started like 3 months ago or whenever April was. I started in April. I don't know. And I'm aiming for the end of summer to have a draft. This is actually going pretty quickly, this one. But with my first one, it took like 8 or 9 months. It really was like a baby that I was like delivering into the world. Yeah, but as far as like what part of the brain do I center on? I mean, it's kind of for me, it's kind of the same thing. It's all like the craft of writing. Like it's all me just like putting my butt in the chair and doing the work. But it feels like the timeline of how long something takes or till it feels ready is a little different.
Earlier you were talking about how you'll write and send it to people and like, I have no clue what this is that normally outside of like 1,000 words of summer, are you just like writing scenes or ideas and then it becomes something maybe, or kind of talk a little more about that.
That's usually just with the essays that I write or the short stories. I haven't written a short story in like quite some time, actually. I'm a bit more focused on the essays, but I'm still like weirdly superstitious about the novel. And I don't want anyone to see it until I have a full draft. like I'm really like I almost brought part of it to my workshop a few months ago. And then because the thing is like I know what I'm doing, or I feel like I know what I'm doing. Maybe I don't, but I feel like I know what I'm doing. And I would get crushed if someone was like, oh, what if it was this, like I don't want it's like I don't want anyone to say anything about it until I have a draft, and then I can be like, okay, now I can revise. And once I finish, like it'll get sent to my agent. I'll have my husband read it. I have my mom read everything I write to, and then probably my friends now, because I didn't have those friends when I was writing the first one or this one, so they'll probably receive that too. So look out for that. But yeah, I'm still superstitious with like sending out like my opening of the novel or something. I'm just like, I'd rather people read the whole thing and be like, oh, I see what you're doing, and think about it that way. I know there's some writers like Sheila Heti, I know will just like send out her work all the time to people at like various stages. And like I envy that in some ways, because then you're just getting so much feedback and critique all the time, and you can really have like a structured process. But I don't know, I'm still like superstitious about it, and I'm like, I don't want anyone to see it until I'm done. It was like my wedding dress, like I didn't want anyone to see it until the day. Like I don't know, I'm weird.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense.
And I'll wrap up with this question. I normally warn writers I'm going to ask this because like everyone freezes. What have you been enjoying recently, reading wise? Anything that's been on your?
Oh, that's totally fine. I'm actually
yeah.
because somebody told me to prepare for this question. So, a book that I really just completely fell in love with, like I read it right before because she was one of my readers that I did a reading with this month too, was Gina Nutt's Night Rooms, a really beautiful memoir told in kind of like fragmented prose. I loved that so much. And if you love movies and horror and gore and all of that stuff, it kind of incorporates that too. And a lot of like the girlhood, that aspect of it too. What else? I read Maglue recently. I'd read everything else of Atessa Moshfegh, but I've never read Maglue. And that was her first book. And it was a novella, and it's like about a sailor at sea. It's pretty crazy. It's phenomenal. That one, like, I don't know how she did that, but it was just amazing. And then I'm actually reading a friend's book right now. My friend Jacqueline Stolos, I'm reading Edendale, which she published in 2020. And it's an LA kind of eco horror story. It's a novel, and it has like different points of view. And I'm really loving it. It has like very short chapters, and I'm finding that, and I know like Leah, your book was like that too, where it's very short sections. And I love reading stuff like that. I don't write like that. I write like long stuff, but I love a book that is just like a section can just be like a page.
Yeah.
I don't know why I like that. It just like feels very, satisfying. And
you can finish it quickly, which I mean is nice. Yeah. Actually, that dovetails with what I was going to say, which is sometime last year, I guess it was, I read Mrs. Bridge by Evan S. Connell and was like in love with that book. And it was published, I think, in the 50s, maybe the late 50s, but it takes place in the 40s. But it is like the fragmented form, and it's in the third person, and it's so incredible. Also, just like the way that he captured this woman's inner life. And then he has like a companion book called Mr. Bridge, which was written in the late 60s that I'm reading now, which is like equally devastating in terms of like the way that, the male, like the husband character of this family is like similarly trapped in his role as like the breadwinner and father, and this sort of like the way that, all men of that era like weren't allowed to be emotional. And yeah, it's like, it's so incredible. And also I was just like, how is it that I thought the like fragment form was like hip, 5 to whatever, 10 years ago, but like, here's this guy doing it like, in the 50s and 60s and doing it better than anyone I've ever basically read.
That's so interesting, because I kind of felt the same, that it's like a new thing, but I guess not. I guess, I don't know. I love that form too. I love it so much.
And then we did get one last question from the audience, from Rachel. It's for both of you. Do you find it easier or more natural to write fiction linearly, or write scenes as they come and piece it together?
I can jump in first. I don't know. I mean, in a way, like, no, well, I don't know. I was going to say writing it's like a natural thing and like not a natural thing at the same time. It's like a weird thing to think that we do this thing. Um, but I really like that question because it's kind of both. Like sometimes, like I said, an image or like a moment will pop into my head and I write a story or something around that. But with the novel, it's kind of like I'm writing towards things. Like I'm like, okay, well, this character is going to hook up with this frat guy in this chapter, but she has to get there. Like, what is she wearing? What does she eat for breakfast or not eat for breakfast? Like, what's the weather? Like, is she taking the bus? Is she walking? Like, so you have to think about all the things in between. And I don't really think about that stuff a lot. Like, I just sit down and I write that out and I just see that's the part that comes naturally to me because that's like the everyday lived experience that you're translating into the fiction. But I don't know. I don't remember the other part of the question, but I think that's really how I work. Like I don't necessarily because I think ideas, I know like David Lynch has that quote, like ideas are like fish, you know, and it's like they're like constantly like swimming by and like, you know, so it's like whatever you kind of latch onto and then follow that one thing. But I'm more like feeling driven. Like I'm trying to write towards a feeling and then I say, well, what situation can I put this character in that they would have that feeling?
Mhm.
Or if it's like I wrote a brunch scene the other day. I write a lot of like basic bitch scenes. And like so these four girls are at brunch and I'm like, I had to get them to brunch because they had to talk about something and they needed to all be together. And I've been to brunch, so like I know what that's like. And you know, so I think it's about like it's kind of like solving a math problem sometimes, but then the natural part is like you've been to a brunch, you know what you would order, what your friends would order, you know what you wouldn't order and you would think about ordering, but then you don't get it. Like, so it's like all of those things come into play. So it's like real life, but you're just setting it up and you're just, you know, orchestrating it.
Yeah, I would say the same. Like, I definitely start with an image a lot of the time, or it's like a small moment or observation that's attached to a feeling. But then it's only like when I know, like, okay, this is a book and this is what I think I want the book to be about, that I start to worry about like chronology or any kind of timeline. That feels like, at least for Vanishing Twins, like it came very late in the game. Everything was like kind of modular, could be moved around for a long time until I really was like nailed down the timeline, and then would notice like, oh, I have a kind of a gap here where like what happened between that one and then this little blurb or whatever. So, and that part feels really nice because then that feels like you're close to the end where you're kind of just like smoothing out the thing that you already have, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both so much, Brittany and Leah, for joining Tattered Cover virtually. I know, Brittany, it's the tail end of this first part of your tour. Can you remind all the readers out there where to find you all on Instagram, your website, all that jazz?
Sure. Go ahead, Brittany.
Yeah, so I have my website is just brittanyackerman.com. I update that pretty regularly. But my Instagram is at sub oat milk. My publisher wanted me to get Instagram and I hate Instagram. So I was like, I'm going to make a joke out of it. Yeah, what else? I might have a few more pieces coming out, like post pub stuff, just essays and stuff like that. But yeah, my website is great. I don't have like a Twitter or anything. I think I would go crazy if I did. So I try to stay off of that. But I'm on Instagram and please follow me and I will chat with you. And I have like no social life, so I will love to like connect with whoever, anyone that reaches out. I'd be happy to connect and talk about writing or life or coffee or whatever it is. Yeah, Leah, go ahead. Plug
Sure. I'm at leahdietrich.com, and my book, Vanishing Twins: A Marriage, is available from all of the major booksellers. And then I am on Instagram at And the Tide Was Way Out, which is a vaguely pretentious, it's the last line of Infinite Jest. But that's what it is.
I love that both of you have like unique Instagram. Brittany, like because I have seen your Instagram handle and I was like, yeah, it's just something. And then like until you said it out loud, I did not understand what it was.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
I,
a
did
lot
not
of
read it.
letters.
I just thought it was like a part of like some name, just like
Yeah,
what.
it's a lot of letters.
So thank you both so much. Thank you to
Thank
everyone
you.
out there in virtual land for joining us. You should get a video, an email of this video in like the next 2 days. Please share it, not for Tattered Cover, but to spread the word on Brittany's book, because it's just the book of the summer. I really do love it. And I don't normally say that at the end of events, but like it's actually honest here.
Well, thank
So
you so
thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you both Brittany and Leah for coming on today.
Thank you for having us, and thank you, Brittany.
Thank you, Leah, and thank you, Adam.
Congrats.
All the virtual people out there. Thank you so much.